The latest conflict between Israel and Hezbollah is escalating. There is no front line, and there is no mediation or diplomatic effort to end it. We are in Hazmieh. This is a suburb of Beirut. It's not considered a Hezbollah stronghold. It is not where Hezbollah supporters live. Behind me, the Comfort Hotel, which was targeted by an Israeli strike in the early hours of the morning.
So before I continue with this story about what Israel is doing to Lebanon, including areas of Lebanon where Hezbollah does not operate and has no control over, I just want to talk a little bit about the value or what I think of when it comes to Beirut, when it comes to countries like Lebanon, like Iran. You know, when you talk about the Armenian diaspora, and I'm talking about people who fled Armenia due to the genocide that was carried out in 1915, they fled to places like Syria. That's where my dad's side of the family ended up. And despite everything you hear about Muslims and Arabs through the propaganda here in US media, these were countries that took Armenians in and gave them a home, a place to be safe. My dad's side of the family ended up in Damascus. My mom's side of the family ended up in Haifa, Palestine. Many Armenians ended up in Beirut. That's why you'll hear about Lebanese Armenians. These are the Armenians who settled in Beirut after the genocide. There are Iranian Armenians, Persian Armenians. These are Armenians who went to Iran for safety after the genocide. And these are places that I never had an opportunity to visit, and to know that some of their historical sites are being targeted, that these places are just being completely destroyed by a belligerent pariah state like Israel it's personal. It really is, because these civilians don't deserve what they're dealing with. But there's no one here to protect them. In fact, in Lebanon, really the only group that seeks to protect Lebanon is Hezbollah. Regardless of what you think about them as a terrorist group or whatever you've heard in the media, without Hezbollah, Israel would have annexed huge portions, huge swaths of land from Lebanon. That's the reality of the situation. So with that in mind, Israel is continuing to escalate its attacks against Lebanon, across Lebanon, in fact. IDF strikes hit a hotel in Beirut, and a residential complex in the eastern part of the country, killing at least 11 people, and that's according to Lebanese state media. And now war-obsessed lawmakers here in the States are also egging Trump to help Israel in its military campaign against the Lebanese. So before we get to Lindsey Graham, the piece of crap that he is, clamoring for even more death and destruction, we do have to update you guys on what's been going on with Lebanon. Because if you can remember, Hezbollah had signed a ceasefire with Israel in 2024. Since then, Israel has violated that ceasefire by carrying out literally thousands of strikes against Lebanon. On Monday, Hezbollah, a Lebanese militant group that's backed by Iran, began firing rockets in northern Israel in retaliation for the killing of Ayatollah Khamenei. And none of those rockets luckily resulted in casualties. As much as I absolutely hate the government and military of Israel, I don't want to see civilians die, period. I don't care if they're Israeli civilians. I don't care if they're Lebanese civilians. Civilians should be protected. But unfortunately, we now live in a world where international law has been totally dismantled, and anything goes. There are no rules. And so a lot of civilians are dying. So none of the rockets, like I said, resulted in casualties on the Israeli side. So 11 people did die in the strikes on Lebanon, but the rockets didn't kill anyone in Israel, luckily. Lebanon's Prime Minister Nawaf Salam condemned Hezbollah's actions as irresponsible and said his government was immediately banning the group's military activities. Okay, good luck with that. Total cucks. So embarrassing. But since then, Israel has carried out waves of airstrikes across Lebanon, in addition to targeting the southern suburbs of Beirut, where Hezbollah does have broad support. Israel has also hit outside of Hezbollah-controlled areas. Why would they do that? I thought this was a war against Hezbollah. So Lebanon's health ministry said Israeli strikes on 2 towns south of Beirut killed 6 people and wounded 8. Then Israel struck a residential building in the eastern city of Baalbek, killing 4 and wounding 6 others. The city's mayor says that only civilians live there, which makes it a perfect target for the Israelis, of course. I mean, what would the Israelis be if they weren't slaughtering civilians? They also hit the Comfort Hotel in a mostly Christian suburb of Beirut called Hazmieh, okay? Hazmieh, sorry about that, with no prior warning. A hotel, guys, a hotel. And that hotel, by the way, is less than a mile away from the presidential palace. So why did Israel strike it? But it's still not clear exactly why it was targeted, other than the fact that we're talking about Israelis. They do terrorism, and that's what this was. There are some reports that there was an Iranian diplomat at the hotel, but those reports are unconfirmed, and I'm sure they're coming from Israel, and I don't trust the Israelis. They lie. That's what they do. It's their specialty. According to the owner of the hotel was sheltering about 13 families that had been displaced by Israel's war on Lebanon. And the only casualty from the strike was their young receptionist. The owner, like many in Lebanon, is fed up with both sides of the war. He says, quote, "They're worse than each other." She muttered, referring to Israel and Hezbollah, 2 sides of the same coin. I don't think Hezbollah exists without Israeli aggression, to be honest with you. Hezbollah exists specifically because of the fact that Israel keeps attempting to encroach on Lebanese land. They keep trying to annex Lebanese land. So in total, since fighting between Hezbollah and Israel resumed on Monday, Lebanon's health ministry says the death toll from Israeli strikes on the country has risen to 72, with at least 437 people wounded. And the death toll did include at least 7 children. Additionally, the UN Refugee Agency said Tuesday that 30,000 displaced people were staying in collective shelters in Lebanon, while many others slept in their car, on sides of the roads, as they could not yet find safe shelter. And honestly, if you're a country targeted by Israel, is there any safe shelter? Israel's the type of country that will tell people to evacuate to a certain area for safety, and then they'll proceed to bomb the area they told people to evacuate to. That's what they did early on their war against Palestinians in Gaza, which later turned into a genocide, of course. That's what they do. There is no safe harbor when you're targeted by Israel. And when I say targeted by Israel, I'm not just talking about Hezbollah, I'm talking about civilians in these countries. They don't care about civilian lives. We're talking about a country that was founded by 3 separate terrorist groups. You think they're gonna care about international law when they're in their quest to acquire more land and control? Come on. Meanwhile, Israel has sent ground troops into the south. Brigadier General Efi Defrin, an Israeli military spokesperson, said on Tuesday that Israeli forces moved forward and took over strategic areas in Lebanon, expanding the Israeli military's zone of control close to Israel's northern border. And Israel really has no plans on stopping their campaign, because this isn't about protecting Israel. This is about taking over the Middle East. Yesterday, they warned residents of more than 80 villages to evacuate immediately. We are at war with the wrong country. If we were at war with the right country, I would seriously consider enlisting. And while Israel is publicly saying that their campaign against Lebanon is simply to protect its citizens along the northern border, military officials admit that their true plan is to go even deeper into Lebanon with the hopes of disarming Hezbollah, Or let me decode that for you. They want the land. Okay, they want the land. They're going for it. That's why they're going deeper into Lebanon. That's why they are bombing areas of Lebanon where Hezbollah doesn't even exist. According to the New York Times, the Israeli plan is to increase pressure on Hezbollah in stages, two Israeli officials said, saying that a small buildup of forces in Lebanon could evolve into a bigger and more ambitious invasion. Those plans were shared with some battalion commanders and other mid-level officers weeks ago before the war with Iran, the official said. So the officers could prepare their troops. Literally, the only just war I could think of would be a war against the Israelis. The Israeli military's chief of staff, Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir, confirmed that the campaign in Lebanon would not stop until Hezbollah was decimated. By the way, everything that Israel does, essentially, like it just reproduces more extremism. And I think that that's on purpose, to be honest with you. They know it. They totally know it. So the idea that they're doing this to disarm a militant group is laughable to me because they kill all sorts of innocent people. And when they do that, that radicalizes people. That creates more extremism in the Middle East. And by the way, more hostility toward Americans in the region and more hostility toward our country. When we as Americans did not want this war, did not want to get dragged into this, but are dragged into it anyway because our government is not accountable to us, doesn't care about us. Whether we're talking about a Democratic administration or Republican administration, the president will open his mouth and take it like a good boy. So the Israeli military's chief of staff, said what he said about disarming Hezbollah. But today, a senior Israeli official acknowledged that Israel misjudged Hezbollah's willingness to engage in a fight. So this was reported by The Cradle, Israeli Channel 13, citing a security source, quote, "We miscalculated the level of force with which Hezbollah joined the battle. And we were wrong regarding Hezbollah and did not expect them to launch missiles with this range." Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Hopefully Hezbollah's firepower is even worse than the Israelis are thinking at this moment. And yeah, I mean it. They should get the F out of Lebanon right now, right now. And honestly, the leaders of all of these Arab countries and Muslim majority countries, do you guys not understand that you're facing an existential threat right now? Do you not see that? You like having your countries destabilized? You like having Mossad come in and spur these ridiculous, nonsensical wars, civil wars within your countries? You like having your land annexed? Like, what is going on here? I would say it would make more sense to maybe build a coalition of Arab states and Muslim majority countries to fight off Israel's aggression. That would be better for them. But for whatever reason, they're just not going in that direction. It's really interesting. And honestly, what this ongoing escalation in the Middle East has made abundantly clear about America and Americans on the international stage is that we're a bit of a paper tiger. I mean, we're running low on interceptors. We're unable to protect our own embassies in the Middle East. We're unable to protect our own military installations in the Middle East. Not a good look, pretty embarrassing for the Americans, isn't it? So for my fellow Americans, how much more of this public humiliation are we gonna take? I loathe Israel, I do. I think that it is a dangerous, vicious, belligerent pariah state. And it is shameful that we continue to enable them. And now, after being one of the leading voices pushing Trump into war with Iran, Senator Lindsey Graham is now begging the president to engage with war against Hezbollah. Take a look.
So I'm calling on President Trump today. Join Israel to attack Hezbollah. Avenge the Marines. America never forgets. Those 220 Marines and 18 sailors' families, we want to go after the infrastructure that killed your loved ones. Their IRGC assets in Beirut as I speak. President Trump, come up with a new operation called Simplify. Fly with Israel and go after Hezbollah, who has American blood on its hands. Not only take the mothership of Iran down, Also take the proxy of Hezbollah, settle the score, even the account.
I have an idea. Why don't we just like airdrop Lindsey Graham in the middle of Iran right now? Or Lebanon. Why doesn't he fight Hezbollah himself? I'd love to see it. So he's referring to Hezbollah's 1983 attack on the US Marine barracks in Beirut, which got 241 Americans killed. By the way, there is some indication that the Israelis knew that it was coming and didn't inform the Americans about it. Par for the course. I think that they had foreknowledge when it came to 9/11 too. But anyway, even Republican Tim Burchett roasted Graham for his bloodthirstiness. Let's take a look at that.
Senator Lindsey Graham is now calling for the U.S. to start bombing Lebanon in response to the Hezbollah IDF action.
Lindsey hadn't seen a fist fight he hasn't wanted to turn into a bombing, right? So I just take it with a grain of salt, dude.
Because Lindsey Graham is a coward and he thinks this makes him look like a tough guy. And of course, this is what his donors want him to do, so he does it. But he doesn't have kids. He doesn't have to worry about his son getting drafted into a disastrous war that could get him killed. By the way, this is escalating very quickly. And if China and Russia gets involved, I don't know how bad this is gonna get. But I'm starting to think that there is a possibility that we could find ourselves in a situation where there is a draft. So, I mean, look, and it's not just what's happening in the Middle East. Like Trump is pursuing regime change in Cuba. Okay, there was a story that we didn't even have time to cover on the show today. We're getting involved in Ecuador. What are we doing? We don't have endless resources and we don't have endless American soldiers to sacrifice for these nonsense wars. This is a total disaster. And like, Trump seems to have lost his mind too. Like I'm seeing the cognitive decline. I think most people can see it. Aside from the weird rashes he's got, I don't know what that's all about. I'm not gonna diagnose him, I'm not a health expert. But in terms of the way he's been behaving, he's definitely lost it, even more than usual. So we're being led by a elderly man in cognitive decline who is totally controlled by a foreign country. This is a disaster. And if people aren't enraged by it, or at least concerned by it, I don't know what world you're living in. I don't know what you're smoking, but honestly, I could use a little because I'm worried. And I feel like everyone else should be too.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.